Okay, so let's jump right in. International law. Well, it just got a massive update. We're talking about a landmark ruling from the world's top court that has seriously beefed up climate obligations for, and this is the key part, every single country on Earth.
And yeah, that's the part you really need to hear. This isn't just about the countries that, sign on the dotted line for specific treaties. Nope. The court has basically made real climate action a binding legal requirement for everyone.
But that brings up a huge question, right? I mean, international law is this incredibly complex patchwork of treaties and then these unwritten rules, these customs. So how in the world did the court manage to weave through all of that to come up with one single clear set of obligations? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to unpack today. Let's dive in.
So let's set the scene. It's July 23rd, 2025. The International Court of Justice, that's the ICJ, drops this unanimous, super highly anticipated advisory opinion. Now, it all started with what sounded like a simple question from the UN General Assembly. They basically asked, hey, what are a country's legal duties when it comes to protecting the climate? Seemed straightforward enough, right? Well, the court's answer, it was anything but simple.
To figure this out, the court couldn't just, pull one treaty off the shelf. They had to do a really deep dive into a whole range of what they called the most directly relevant laws. And we're talking about the whole shebang here. The UN Charter, big climate deals like the Paris Agreement, and then, and this is really the key to the whole puzzle, those unwritten rules of what's known as customary international law.
And right there, that's the absolute heart of the legal challenge the court was facing. Think about it. How do you take all these different rules, some written, some not, made at totally different times for different reasons, applying to different countries, and make them all work together?
Okay, so the main conflict really boils down to two different kinds of law. On one side, you've got your treaties. The best way to think about them is like super specific contracts, like the Paris Agreement. They only apply to the countries that actually signed them. But then on the other side, you've got customary law. And this is totally different. These are more like the fundamental, unwritten rules of the road for how countries behave. They apply to every single state, period. It doesn't matter if you sign something or not. These rules apply to you just for being a country. So here's the million-dollar question. What happens when these two things overlap? When you've got a specific treaty and also a general, unwritten rule about the same exact issue. Which one wins? Which law gets to call the shots?
Well, a bunch of countries actually made an argument for this. They basically said, look, this specific law should always beat the general one. Their thinking was that these incredibly detailed climate treaties, the ones that were painstakingly negotiated for years, well, those should be the main rules. They should basically push aside those broader, unwritten, customary laws.
Now, this whole argument hangs on a legal principle called lex specialis. It's just a fancy Latin phrase that means the specific law wins. But, and this is a huge but, the court pointed out that it's not some kind of automatic trump card you can just play. For it to actually apply, one of two things has to be true. Either the two laws are in direct conflict, like they literally contradict each other, or you have to have rock-solid proof that the treaty was specifically designed to replace the old general rule.
So, did the court buy that argument? The answer was a clear, firm, unanimous no. They looked at the facts and said, nope, neither of those conditions are met here. The climate treaties don't clash with the general duty to protect the environment. If anything, they make it stronger. And there was zero proof that when countries signed the Paris Agreement, they were intending to just erase all their other basic legal duties. Okay, so if one law doesn't just cancel out the other one, then what? What happens? This is where the court got really clever. Instead of seeing these two types of law as enemies locked in a fight, they found a way to show how they can actually work together and even make each other stronger. They used this awesome principle called systemic integration. It sounds complicated, but the idea is pretty simple. When you have a whole bunch of different rules all talking about the same problem, you don't pick a winner. Instead, you read them all together as a single system and figure out how to make them fit harmoniously. It's not about which law wins the fight. It's about how they complete the puzzle. The court even called this a bidirectional process, which is basically a fancy way of saying it's a two-way street. Think of it like this. Those big general rules, like the duty to prevent harm, they give us the context, the why behind the specific climate treaties. But then it works the other way too.
The specific things countries agree to do in those treaties, that helps us define what that vague duty to prevent harm actually means in the real world, right now. They feed into each other. Each one makes the other clearer and stronger. All right, so that's all the legal theory, the how they did it. But what you really want to know is, what does this actually mean for countries on the ground? What's the real-world impact? Let's get into what this new reality looks like.
So the court made it crystal clear that 2 of these big, unwritten customary duties now apply with their full weight to climate change. First, there's the duty to prevent significant environmental harm. And we're not just talking about, a polluted river in one country. This now squarely applies to the global climate. And second, the duty to cooperate. I mean, the court was pretty blunt about it. It's impossible for any single country to fix this alone. So cooperation isn't just a nice idea, it's a legal duty.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The court uses this whole legal framework to build a powerful incentive for every country to get on board. It sets up these presumptions. It's like this. If you're in the treaties and you're genuinely trying to comply, the court basically presumes you're also meeting your general duties. Okay. Now, what if you're not in the treaty, but you're cooperating in other ways that are basically the same? Well, you might be covered, but here's the kicker. If you're not in the treaties and you're not cooperating, then the shoe is on the other foot. You have the entire burden of proof to show that what you're doing at home is enough to meet these basic customary laws. It's a brilliant way to nudge everyone towards working together.
So the big takeaway here is that this is not just some dusty legal opinion for law professors to argue about. No way. By weaving these 2 types of law together so elegantly, the court has literally written a brand new global playbook for climate action and accountability.
So let's just boil it all down. What are the major headlines from this? First, and most importantly, climate obligations are now stronger for everybody. Second, that 1.5-degree goal from the Paris Agreement, it's not just a nice goal anymore. The court just upgraded it to a hard legal benchmark. Third, and this is a really big deal, because these duties are part of that unwritten customary law, a country can't just quit a treaty to escape them. They stick. And finally, all of this gives a massive boost to anyone looking to bring climate lawsuits against governments in the future.
And that really brings us to our final thought here. The analysts who dug into this ruling pointed out something really profound. The legacy of this case could go way beyond just climate change. The method the court used here, choosing harmony and integration instead of conflict, that could become a new blueprint for how international law deals with all kinds of complex global problems. It's a decision that will likely be feeling the ripple effects out for a very, very long time.